Let's take you straight across to our panelists this evening. We're joined from Boston tonight by Peter Kolachinski. He is a virologist, a scientist, biotechnology investor. He runs the Boston-based investment firm RA Capital Management. Also joining us from India, Kiran Majumdar-Shaw, the executive chairperson of Biocon India. Dr. Arvind Kumar from the Sir Ganga Ram Hospital joining us from here in Delhi. Thank you very much to all of you. Peter Kolachinski, to you first. What have you been able to learn about this virus now that you've had some time to study it over the last few months? What's new in the last couple of months?
Sure. So, first of all, in the last couple of months is about all the time that any of us have had to learn about the virus, so everything is new. I think that the thing that I found most reassuring about this virus is that while it's new to the world, and the world has not really had to learn very much about these kinds of viruses, with the exception of SARS and MERS that have popped up briefly in the past, this virus is very much like other viruses that we know, like the viruses that cause the common cold. It's much more serious because it's different from those other viruses.
I can hear your voice, not the program audio.
Sorry, please go ahead.
Okay. This is going to be a virus that we are going to be able to develop vaccines against. We know how to do it. And we are making really good progress, as your own program has just mentioned. I'd say that probably the thing that is going to be newest to the public is that as everybody is focused on figuring out whether or not a vaccine works, and we'll soon know. For example, the Oxford study has just started up. We'll be generating data over the next couple of months that are going to be very informative. We're going to all switch to talking about how do we get to very large-scale production of vaccines. As your own program mentioned, the Oxford vaccine that's being developed in conjunction with a company called VACCINATED is going to require some significant scale-up. They'll have 1 million doses towards the end of this year. But how do they get to hundreds of millions and even over 1 billion doses? And that's going to take time. Companies like J&J are focused on that now, scaling up to 1 billion doses by early next year of a very similar vaccine. So we need to really start focusing on large-scale production, not just proof of whether or not the vaccine
So
works.
you actually sound optimistic. Optimistic that we could actually get a vaccine sooner than later, because until now, most experts seem to think that it would take about 18 months at the very least, or at least a year to 18 months. So are you hopeful it could be sooner than that?
Well, I would point out that it really depends on what you mean by we. So I think that there will be proof that vaccines work over the next couple of months. I think that there will be an availability of some vaccines towards the end of this year, maybe even in the fall. But odds are those initial doses, merely millions of doses, maybe even 10 million doses, will be available to frontline workers, healthcare workers, firefighters, people that put themselves at greatest risk. And that's who we want to have these initial doses. And then for all the rest of us, the billions of people around the world that are going to want to get vaccinated, it's going to take a little bit more time. And the largest scale production of vaccines is likely to come online, I think, sometime in the second quarter, in the early spring of next year. And it may not be from the same companies that give us the first doses of the vaccine. So it may not be the Oxford vaccine, it may not be the mRNA vaccines from companies like Moderna. Those may be the first to the market, but the ones that we, the rest of us, are likely to get at very large scale across the world may be different vaccines that come online starting in the spring, towards the middle of the year, and maybe even some people won't be getting it until the end of next year, since it's going to take time to generate many billions of doses for everyone in the world.
I think, Kiran Majumdar-Shaw, you'd be the perfect person then to talk about this production issue, the production of the vaccine. In your view, at least as far as India's efforts are concerned, are you hopeful that we would be able to, in the span of the next few months, get somewhere on this?
Well, as you know, first and foremost, I think India has a very large vaccine production capacity. I also understand the Serum Institute has partnered, or at least has partnership with research group, and I assume utilizing the capacity to generate some of these billions of doses. Between the various vaccine producers in the country, I think we do have capacity to produce billions of doses. And I believe that we do have to
Ma'am, apology. I'm so sorry. We're just having a problem with your audio. We're going to connect back to you in just 30 seconds. I apologize for that. Let me ask Dr. Arvind Kumar his view on this. Dr. Kumar, firstly, we heard the government of India today sounding fairly sort of cautiously optimistic about how India is doing, saying that our growth has not been exponential, it's been linear, we're doing better than the US or the UK. Do you think that that will hold? All right, I think technology is failing us. So I actually think, Mr. Kolachensky, that I have a better luck getting to you in Boston than I have connecting to people here in India. So let me take this back to you. Can I ask you, though, one of the big questions that people have about a vaccine is, will it work? Because there are some experts who've suggested that we really don't know how long this immunity will last in people who do get the coronavirus or COVID-19. And therefore, a vaccine may not be that effective. So my question is, we all get a vaccine for the flu every year. That is what is recommended. I know I do. So could this potentially become something like that, where we get vaccinated every year for it if it turns out to be seasonal?
Yes, it absolutely could turn out to be something like that, and that's okay. The flu vaccines every year have to change for, we need to get a flu vaccine every year for two reasons. One is that our immunity to the vaccine does wane. Our immune systems basically forget what the vaccine has trained them to do, so we have to remind it. But also flu changes from year to year. It's a very, highly unstable kind of virus that likes to change its face and fool our immune system every season. So we have to chase it down, figure out what the strains are every year, what they look like, and quickly generate a new vaccine every season. We're lucky in that coronaviruses, which is what SARS-2 is, are not nearly as prone to mutation. They are much more likely to stay the same from year to year. They change a little bit. You hear about mutations, but they're not mutations that change the virus dramatically the way that flu's mutations can. And so we need to develop good vaccines, and the vaccines that we will be taking a year from now are likely to be the same vaccines that we are giving to people that we're getting again and again for many years to come, if, as we think will happen, this SARS-2 virus stays with us, like flu vaccines. And that's okay. We can bundle it together with the flu vaccine, and every year we'll get a vaccine that protects us both against the flu and keeps reboosting our immunity, reminding our immune system of what SARS-2 looks like.
I'm going to try my luck and try to connect with Dr. Arvind Kumar here in Delhi again. Dr. Kumar, I was just trying to ask you before this whether you share the Indian government's optimism that we're doing better than some other countries.
Nidhi, I 100% share that optimism, and the reason is actually based on the data. If you look at the growth of the cases and the infection in our country, in the pre-lockdown era, the rate at which the infection was spreading, and you compare it with the rate at which the infection is spreading now, and the way we have behaved, the virus has behaved in 1 month. If you look at Europe or USA, within a month of landing there, it had reached a chaotic state in 4 or 5 European countries as well as in the US. Here, between 20th March and 20th April, we have seen a linear growth. Moreover, at that time when we started the lockdown, we were testing at a very low level, maybe about 2,500 tests a day. Today, we are testing about 35,000 a day. Despite this increase in testing, the percentage of cases which are turning out to be positive has remained the same, which is, I think, a very, very reassuring feature. Definitely, we have not been able to contain it completely because the numbers are increasing. However, the growth is not exponential as had happened in Europe and US. So that success, actually, the credit goes to the lockdown and the way people in the country, by and large, barring exceptions, have followed the lockdown.
Therefore, I want to ask you quickly, Dr. Arvind Kumar, that do you think India should now begin gradually lifting the lockdown after the 3rd of May? Because we obviously cannot continue in this state either indefinitely, but is it time to start opening up?
Nidhi, I'm a doctor, so my thinking is always heavily influenced by medical reasons rather than economic reasons. And the biggest fear I have is that if we lift the lockdown and lift it completely at a time and people start going out, making people follow social distancing as effectively post-lockdown as they are doing during lockdown, I find a lot of practical difficulty. And I've seen it happening when sometimes if I go for some groceries and all to nearby places, I find that people sometimes are maintaining distance, sometimes are not. So when they start going to offices and all, maybe few days later, this fear will go away. And that's when we may actually start having an increase in the transmission. And that may make us lose the gains that we have had. So given a choice, I would say that only when our number of cases, the graph is on the downward trend, that probably will be the a time when this should be lifted.
So in your view, because, you know, at the end of the day, Dr. Kumar, the point is that economic hardships can also lead to other problems for people. I mean, not just economically, but health-wise. So one obviously doesn't expect a full lifting of the lockdown, but would you suggest that it has to be gradual, piecemeal, with very strict social distancing rules in place for, let's say, at airports, at shops, etc.?
So, Nidhi, I would have a differential approach for the districts which are not having any cases. I would call them my precious districts. So suppose there are 300 odd districts in the country which have not reported any case in the last 14 days. For me, those will be very precious districts which need to be now saved from getting any infection from nearby areas. So I would probably seal the borders, or give them, open it up inside the city, but not allow any, people to come from outside and bring infection. So that's one part of my country opened up locally, but not getting infiltrators from outside. And then I'll focus my attention to those districts which are still having higher numbers. So increase testing in those areas, isolate the cases who are positive, find their contacts, quarantine. So zero in on those hotspots, try and reduce the size of the hotspots and gradually coming to grips and controlling. And as things improve, slow lifting of lockdowns in those areas. So blanket lifting across the country definitely will lead to disaster.
Well, Peter Kolachensky, just to get you back on this issue of how countries should deal with lifting of lockdowns, we're seeing that some European countries are doing exactly what Dr. Arvind Kumar is saying, which is a very, very gradual lifting of lockdowns. And I mean, Wuhan is still struggling after all these days. It's a new normal that people are adjusting to. What would you recommend, given the huge debate in the US right now with the president taking one line, governors of different states taking a different line? How soon is too soon?
So what we know is that a country can be infected with just one person who's contagious and spreading it to many other people. So even if we get this pandemic under control in a given region, but there's even one person who's infected, we can't just go back to normal. However, we're not really talking about going back to normal. We're talking about what kind of intermediate measures can we take where we allow people to go back to work, maybe after getting tested and being confirmed to either be negative or to be recovered, and then to be very vigilant to detect anybody who might be infected so we can quickly quarantine them so so that we can quickly even quarantine the people they've been around. It's called contact tracing. And any society that is able to put that plan in place can explore getting people back to work. It doesn't mean that it's a good idea to have many people mixing together at bars or going to large crowded events, and it's not even clear that it's a good idea to bring kids together at school and risk potentially infecting all the families that they go home to. If there's an older person living in a home, then sending a child to school, risking getting infection, and then bring it back to the home could really put that older person at risk. So I think that some of the small pleasures in life, being able to see your family again, your friends again, if people get tested and know that they're negative and they trust each other to stay protected, I think they will be able to get back together with their friends and their families and restore some of the small joys in life. But I wouldn't go, into any parade for quite some time. We need vaccines in order to truly get back to normal. And like I said before, those are likely to take about a year, maybe a little bit more, for most of the people in the world to get.
Do you see, though, that in this year or so, in which we wait for a mass vaccine, that we all can't sort of live like this, no flights, no travel at all. At some point, things will have to start working again. So, do you see a world where it's going to be very different when you fly? Fewer people might fly, but those that have to might have a seat empty next to them. Temperature checks at airports. Lots of social distancing rules everywhere.
Yeah, I think that when we have vaccines, there's a very good chance that we will go back to almost the normal life that we had before COVID. And I say almost because there are certain reasonable things that we can think about not doing. We might change our views of shaking hands, for example. People started shaking hands at some point in the past to show I'm not armed, I don't have a weapon. The trouble is that today, in a world where we know about germs and we know about viruses, in fact, we know that everybody is armed. And so we might want to think about not shaking hands. As for airplanes, I think that when everybody is vaccinated and when the risk of getting an infection of SARS-2 is reduced for most people to be a much milder infection at worst, I think we can probably go back to using airplanes the way that we did, with the same number of seats, and they can be just as uncomfortable as they were before.
All right, but until then, you might find the seat next to you empty. Don't know if that's good or bad. Thank you very much for joining us, Peter Koliczynski there from Boston, giving us some perspective on this virus and the hunt for a vaccine.